You're listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network, and now it's time for the Paranormal Peep Show.
Hi folks, you're listening to the Paranormal Peep Show with myself, Andy Chaplin, aka Donald Trump, Neil Donald, Neil Ward. I was going to say Neil Donald Walsh then. That's a whole different thing. Neil Ward, it's been a long time, Neil. And we've got Ben Emlyn-Jones, and we've got the wonderful, I'll let the guest introduce himself. Matt, I believe, is your name. Hello, Matt, how are you?
Oh, yeah, doing fine, thanks.
Fantastic. It's been a while since I've been on because there've been various things been going on. But as we can all see, and I don't know if the text is kind of like the right way around. Does that say, is that the right way around? It's kind of back to front where I am, but here we are. We're in November time now, and Neil had to put his glasses on to see what's going on. And the big orange man won. Big orange man won. I was not expecting this. I was expecting the same thing that happened where apparently Biden won, and I thought they'd do the same thing again. But here we are. The big orange man got in. Neil and Ben, have you seen the videos where somebody is in a poll booth in America and they're using their finger to try and tap one of these digital selection things for Donald Trump, and they're tapping it 6 or 7 times, and then the final time it does actually work, but it highlights Kamala? Have you seen that video?
No, I haven't. No. I haven't seen this video, Andy, but I'm concerned about this thing. I mean, I'm concerned, obviously.
I've actually put it in the
There has been instances in many countries around the world where elections, I'm concerned about the results of elections. It's usually in parts of the third world.
Yeah.
But even in the world's second biggest democracy, these things can happen. And, of course, there is an establishment, there is a deep state, if you want, that tends to gravitate towards a particular candidate in elections. I found that throughout history, this is the case. It's always happened, long before this technology was invented. I mean, in some countries, for example, there's been reports that have been published by the United Nations in various parts. Usually the third world this happens, where people walk into a country will announce it's holding free elections. People will walk into the polling station. They'll be presented with a ballot slip that has just one name on it. These things do happen. So, all I can say is make ghost hunting great again.
So what happened in 2020, and I'm going to use the word for legal reasons, allegedly. Okay, so that covers us as a legal disclaimer. Allegedly, late at night, around about 3:30, there was these mysterious trucks turning up outside poll booths. And apparently curtains and hoardings were put up so people can't see inside the poll booths of what was going on. And all of these ballots for Democrats and Bidens were allegedly brought in. And suddenly there was a massive, and you probably remember the graphs, kind of Trump was doing quite well in 2020. There was a huge spike miraculously for the Democrats. Not only that, but I think it was Stephen Crowder who then discovered that there were some alleged voters that were in fact dead, or some addresses that did not exist. And I believe from memory, he went round in a car trying to find some of these addresses and cities of these alleged voters, and found out that either the addresses didn't exist or the people were dead. And then I come across a video, and I actually have the video, and I've put it on the Paranormal Peep Show, on the Facebook group. So if anyone is listening, go onto the Facebook group of the Paranormal Peep Show. The video is there. There is a man in a poll booth in front of a digital electronic voting machine, and he is trying to press Donald Trump 6 times, and it is not doing a thing. Eventually he swaps hand for whatever reason. The other hand worked. He goes onto his left hand. He clicks Donald Trump, and Kamala Harris is highlighted. He has now voted for Kamala Harris. Question: who is coding these machines? How prevalent is this? How many machines does this affect? How many states is this in? Is this vote rigging?
I was just going to ask one question.
Yeah.
How come they're allowing a camera to film a guy voting?
Oh, he voted it. He must have done it kind of undercover. It was very much on a mobile.
Oh, I see.
Thing. Okay. It wasn't a TV camera. It was
right.
You can't film. You can't film openly in polling stations, but you film secretly. I mean, if what you're saying is true, Andy, and this
video,
and these sort of actions are going on, then the people who, regardless of who you support in this last election, I mean, I'd say to people, even Democrat voters and people who supported Kamala Harris, it's in your interest to record it when you see these things happening, I'd say.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, as for the dead voting, I mean, that's a very paranormal segue, isn't it? But yeah, I've heard of things like this happening, and obviously this does concern me. Unfortunately, I think, Neil, you want to upload this to YouTube, don't you?
It will be, and obviously our podcast will go out on various platforms.
You won't be able to do that with the last 5 minutes of conversation we've just had. And I mean, I hate it. I hate that happening. But YouTube have essentially said this is misinformation, and they're not going to allow it on their platform. And I disagree with that. I think it's
what we might have to do is two versions. We might have to have a version where freedom of speech is allowed, and then what we'll do now, we've done this in the past, we've had a picture of Kim Jong-un with music playing. This will be playing for people who are on communist censorship networks, so we'll play that. And what another thing I'd say with these machines, so what they could come back with, whoever it is, they could go, oh, it's just a fault with the machine. Okay, so we then need to ask, well, how many machines have this fault, and how many states have these machines with the fault? And also, how difficult is it really if your sole job and your sole purpose is to create a machine that allows you to press one button once, like every 4 years? How difficult is that? When you go to McDonald's, it's all digitized. Well, most McDonald's are digitized. They've got these machines. You go in and you can tap away, tap. You can have fries, and you can have, and by the way, any other restaurant that's got this as well. So we're not endorsing McDonald's, but McDonald's is the one where I've had the experience. You can tap away at all these different options of milkshakes and drinks, and you could go through 4, 5, 6 different pages of options, and it all works flawlessly, and you get to the end and you pay. How difficult is it to create a machine that has one screen where you press 1 or 2 and it highlights what you press? How difficult is that?
Well, they could
have been to any other McDonald's I've ever been to where I've had to go tap.
Yeah, I don't eat that kind. I try not to eat that kind of prolls. There's nothing else available.
I love it.
Yeah, it's not exactly haute cuisine.
No,
but
I mean, what you've got to ask yourself about all of this is, first off, what's the provenance of the video clip? It's one video clip, and we're making a humongous load of projections about it. We need to know the provenance of that.
But the second thing is, I'm aware that there have been many reports of this happening.
Well,
I came across the video,
but the second,
I came across the video, and basically
the red mirage at the beginning of the
so it's not just kind of like a supposition.
When you get a load of when you get a load of states declaring first, they're the least populated states. The most populated states are the ones that declare last, which is why you get that massive surge of red at the beginning. And then last time, you got that massive surge of blue at the end, because the most densely populated are the east and the west coast. And they're the ones that most likely vote Democrat. That's why that happened. I would also ask, if there is a massive conspiracy with these voter things, then you have to ask yourself, they did a pretty crap job, didn't they? Because it didn't work, did it?
Good. I'm glad it didn't work.
All I'm saying is, I don't believe anything of these videos that I see on the internet at all.
Okay, so if I showed you the actual video of somebody,
but you're showing me a video.
Yeah, I'm showing you a video.
Okay. I mean, I trust no one on these video things at all. I literally trust no one. I have to see it with my own eyes. That's why I don't believe all these old videos and things like that, because, to be honest, it's a load of dust, mostly, and mites and stuff. So I am incredibly skeptical, and I think you have to have a very skeptical mind to be able to.
It's when it's there in front of you and they're actually recording it. Well, there it is.
But you're only seeing what they've recorded. You don't know what the background is. I mean, I could fake a video like that, no problem.
They're literally tapping it on the screen. You can see his finger tapping.
What screen are they tapping?
Their screen saying Donald Trump. There's a little.
I could make screen say Donald Trump in Photoshop.
Go for it.
You know what I'm saying?
Go for it. Send it to us. We'll put it up.
Okay, I'll do it.
You do that. You recreate the video.
Show me the video and then
copy it.
And it also shows the voting machine. So if you can recreate the voting machine as well.
If I got enough money behind me, right? If I got enough money behind me and I wanted an agenda,
somebody who's very famous.
Well, I've not got millionaires backing me.
So the person,
you know what I'm saying?
Somebody's got a lot of money behind them.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean,
that's the logical explanation.
There's a lot more to this situation than that.
I'm just
it's really. I mean, seriously. I mean, I believe in free speech. I really, really do.
I do.
But the platform that Neil uses an awful lot doesn't. And whether you agree with it or not, this platform does not. I don't agree with it, but this platform bans certain subjects from being discussed.
Yeah,
it's a shame. It's a shame.
We'll have to split this into.
We could have a 2-hour conversation on this subject alone. Couldn't we?
Yeah, we'll have to have
we could never upload it to YouTube. We'd have to put it onto an alt text site.
Yeah,
so put it on
Rumble, I think is.
Yes, Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute, there's several others.
Yeah.
Vimeo.
Vimio's not bad, actually. Vimio's quite good, actually, I found.
Ironically, Trump was working at McDonald's for about a week or something, wasn't he?
He did. He was a dustman as well, it's like...
Yeah, he's had a fair few jobs. Obviously, he had to pay his bills whilst he was out of power. So it's interesting. Now, whilst we're on that, I mean, I don't want to hang around on Donald Trump forever, but he's going to sort of do stuff with the UFO stuff. Ben, is he? When
he was on the Joe Rogan Experience, which is kind of like a rite of passage for anyone who's interested in a political career in this country, which didn't bode well for Kamala's campaign because she's still in the negotiation phase when the election happened with Joe. She may appear on Joe's show now post-election, you never know, in which case I'll watch that with interest. I'm interested to hear what makes her tick. But Rogan actually did breach... Well, no, he didn't bring this subject up. Trump did. The Donald himself brought up this... I was waiting for Joe to say, well, what about the UFOs, Don? Come on, tell us about the UFOs. But Trump, I can't remember his exact word. I wrote an article about it at the time. Let me just find it, because I mean I don't have all the information to hand. I didn't know this issue was going to be raised, but I did actually write an article about it at the time. Just a moment.
So in chat, people won't be able to see this listening, but in chat I've dropped the video of the guy trying to vote for Trump.
Cheers, thanks. Where is it? You see, here we go. Yeah, he appeared. It's really because, like, could Trump be the disclosure president? I mean, this is always a question. I know a lot of people in the exopolitics community don't think he possibly could be. I know a lot of them thought that Harris... I know a lot of the people in the exopolitical community thought that Harris could be the disclosure president. I suppose the obvious question is why, if he was president from 2017 to 2021, why couldn't he do disclosure then? And it could be... There's several reasons for that, possibly because he's not what people hoped he would be. Well, secondly, because the situation has changed since then. But he does mention several things. He's a good friend of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is very suspicious about his father's death, as he should be, because I'm dubious about his conviction. But he also mentions his uncle JFK, John F. Kennedy, who was shot as well. Now, according to the... well, this is really, really strange because Trump says when they were in the middle of this discussion about Kennedy assassination conspiracies, Trump said he'd been told a lot about UFOs, but he didn't tell Joe an awful lot. That he didn't say, well, Lex Friedman, for example, in that particular interview, because Trump said he'd interviewed pilots. He didn't say what kind of pilot or who they were. Were they airline pilots, U.S. Navy, U.S. Air Force, private light aircraft pilots? But he said he'd interviewed people who told him they'd seen things like a round ball that was not a comet or a meteor, that was capable of hypersonic speed, which is one of the 5 observables. And I got the impression that despite the fact he raised this subject first, Trump felt a bit uncomfortable with Joe's questions. And Joe sort of softened a little bit, and he said he started talking about the probes on Mars. And, of course, the Chinese drones and the balloons, remember those, which what was one confirmed balloon and others they just described as objects. So...
Could it be, Ben, could it be possibly, because Trump has already had a term already as president, that he became uncomfortable with this question about UFOs because maybe he's already been briefed on this?
Yes, I think that's quite likely. I think that before the election, he may well have realised this is a sticking point. There could be many reasons for his prevarication, and I think it may be involved not jumping into the fray too soon over this. On the converse side of this argument, Kamala Harris has never mentioned UFOs to my knowledge. I mean, in her speech, she didn't give as many speeches as Trump. She didn't do as many interviews. She's never mentioned this subject even once. Even on the Jimmy Kimmel show, she didn't mention it. So
Hillary did, apparently.
Yes, she did. Which is, but very, very. So did her husband.
Clinton was very into the UFO thing.
So did Obama.
I didn't know that.
Now, we may find. I mean, if we find out, it'll probably be on Joe's show. If Kamala goes on Joe's show, which she's going to still, there's no reason why she shouldn't, just because she lost. In which case, she may say, if I'd been president, I'd release all the files about disclosure. She may say anything to make people regret. Yeah, she may say anything to make people regret them not voting for her. She's a professional. Unlike Trump, she is like a career professional politician rather than a guy who is essentially he was originally sort of non-political and entered politics. U.S. president was the first political office he ever ran for, which is interesting. So, I mean, it remains to be seen. But, I think Trump deserves a chance. I think we should give him a chance to be the disclosure president. I know Steve Bassett is not going to like me saying that. He and Grant Cameron are probably crying into a bottle of whiskey right now. But I think their lament is I think a little bit premature. So let's wait and see.
Do you think some dark suits, because Trump might be on the verge of disclosing something, let's say, and do you think the dark suits will get to him and say, actually, that's probably not a good idea because X, Y, Z?
Well, several strangest things have happened already, haven't they, to him? I mean, he's had a couple of narrow brushes with death, hasn't he? And I won't go into details, but there's reasons we should be suspicious of some kind of institutional collaboration as a result of these attacks. I'm absolutely sure he has the resources to hire an entire battalion of mercenaries if he wants, which I'm sure, if he values his life, he's already done. Men who are apolitical and maybe not corrupt and more reliable than the U.S. Secret Service. However, there could be many things that he might say that he might. It's like this whole thing about Bill Hicks. Bill Hicks always used to say, when a new president comes into power, they take him to a room.
Yeah, I remember.
They run a camera, and they see the assassination of Kennedy from a different direction. They say, hang on, this isn't the Zapruder film. This is coming from the direction of the grassy knoll. And then they turn to the president, and they return to the president-elect, and they say, all right, any questions? And he replies, only what my agenda is.
Right. Okay. I think we'd better leave Trump and UFOs for the minute. So we will get on to our guests. Sorry to keep you waiting for that. They haven't chatted for a while, so they need to get it off their chest a little bit. So, Matt Arnold, thank you very much for joining us. So just to give a little bit of background for our audience that are listening or viewing, we met you at the end of August. You was kind of one of the participants in the Seriously Strange conference, which was run by the Association of Phenomena. I can't remember what they're called now.
The Scientific Phenomena.
Thank you.
Yeah.
ASAP or something like that. And you also kind of co-hosted a dialogue between members of the panel and the audience as well. So you kind of hosted that. So welcome to the Paranormal Peep Show. Thanks for taking the time out to come and chat to us. Now, you did a presentation there on hauntings, which I thought was a very interesting thing. It's one that hadn't been covered before, to your knowledge, and you actually went back and looked through the diaries of the people that the original haunting was affected by. So what was that haunting? Can you tell us a bit about that?
So this is about the Epworth Rectory poltergeist case, which comes from the 1700s. We're talking sort of 4 weeks over December to January of, I can't remember the date exactly. I think it's 1716 to 1717, something like that. And interestingly, it's incredibly well documented. Not because of people going and investigating it themselves, but by the actual people that were experiencing this particular phenomena, or the phenomena that were taking place. So the people that the house itself, Epworth Rectory, was the residence of Samuel Wesley and his family. And essentially, John Wesley is the guy who invented Methodism, really. And John Wesley was a bit of a paranormal investigator. He was really wanted to know what was going on with this. And about 70 years later, he wrote a story, or the accounts of the hauntings and the apparitions and the things like that went on in his father's house. And I thought, oh, that's great, lovely. It was during lockdown when I was doing this research, really. I got nothing else to do. I was furloughed. So I took this case and I thought, right, what can I do from an armchair sleuthing perspective? And the materials that I had access to were the letters between the family members and the recollections that he had from his memoir 70 years later, but also managed to find the layout of the house as well from an English heritage tree ring analysis that was had been done on the property. So they had the layout of the property at the time the analysis was done. So nobody that I'd know had done this previously. I wanted to go back and walk through the haunting day by day, week by week, map out where things happened in certain places, when they happened, and who was where, who was living, who was sleeping in what rooms at the time, who was moving around in what rooms. And you can do all of that from the letters themselves. They can tell you who was where at those locations. So you can even see other people coming in from outside the family. You've got the local vicar from up the road was basically called in to try and help out at one point towards the end. And that was actually the last time that they had any major stuff happen. But we've got things that are bangings in and around the house. We've got groans. You've got sounds like chains rattling and metalwork rattling. Things like bottles being smashed under staircases. All sorts of stuff, rustling of clothing as it's going past people. Even a headless badger going up a girl's skirt, which was the one thing that seemed to raise a lot of smiles at ASAP. I don't know why.
Headless badger.
Headless badger, yes. That was what the mother recalled, but it's not in any of the other letters from any of the other witnesses. So it's fairly subjective, that one. So yeah, I decided I'd go and plan it out, work it out, and then about a year later, I was able to go and see the different places themselves. One of the interesting things was, according to the accounts, if you timeline and dovetail it all together, you can see where there should be a particular doorway between two rooms, and it's not on the plan that the English Heritage have got, and it's not there in terms of the doorway itself has been blocked up, but there was a doorway there in that's been blocked up, and I've discovered that through the letters themselves. You could work that out. Then things like, where was the paper room, the paper chamber, because wallpaper was expensive and it wouldn't have been used in the nursery, it was used somewhere else instead. So we've got some of the rooms being swapped around. So, and other people have used the letters to work out where people were residing, what rooms there were. The interesting thing is that all of the family, you've got the male and female parents, but then you've got 6 girls and 2 boys. 3 lads. 3 lads were away from the house at the time. They were being schooled in London, and this is Epworth in Lincolnshire. So it was only girls that were in the house at the time, ranging from sort of 20, 21 down to something like 6. And you've also got a servant, the male servant of Mr. Samuel Wesley, and you've got sort of a maid type character. And the male servant was sleeping in the loft area on the 2nd floor, sort of 3rd floor for American listeners. And that was his residence. And I kind of think, from looking at some of the analysis of the drainage that was taking place in the historical records, they were draining that particular area of the land around the Lincolnshire flats and the Isle of Axholme. And I think that there was some land settlement going on that was making the stuff creak. The house itself was reasonably new because the previous one had burnt down. Disgruntled villagers, they think, were the ones that caused that. So I'm thinking that there initially was some phenomena that happened in terms of creaks and bangs. One person reckons they saw a floating grinding corn mill for grinding corn. They saw that floating through the air. But that's the one thing that appears, and it appears in the later recollections, 70 years later. It doesn't appear in any of the original documentation. So I think, as Tolkien, Gandalf said, or maybe Fran Walsh's version of Gandalf, and then Peter Clark's, or Jackson's, Peter Jackson's version of Gandalf, all good stories deserve embellishment. And I think that's what was going on with the Poltergeist. I think it's the same as East Drive, 30 East Drive, as well. Originally something was happening. It died off very quickly, and in order to continue the excitement, some of the family members carried it on, and maybe even one of them used it to their advantage to cover up a potential affair, or a relationship they were having with one of the manservant.
That might explain the headless badger. So you think there was any kind of psychic activity, or do you think it was just some sort of land movement that was causing the noises?
Well, I'm fairly sceptical. From what I can see, I don't think there was anything. I think there was a lot of suggestion going on. I'm a believer in this sort of stuff, but I think there was a lot of suggestion, a lot of bored girls wanted some excitement in their lives, having an oppressive father over them.
It does have the kind of qualities, though, that are reminiscent of other poltergeist.
The Enfield haunting was exactly that.
Yeah.
So the girls there, Janet and Margaret, I think from memory, the allegations there were they were making things up to get attention. However, there were some odd things that were seen by police officers and magicians and illusionists and press people. So there's a weird mix between the girls having a laugh and having fun. And funnily enough, Maurice Grosse actually caught the girls pranking around, and he knew what was going on. He wasn't stupid. And the girls kind of later admitted that they were pranking around. However, layered on top of that was the actual genuine stuff as well.
So I think there could potentially have been something going on at the beginning, but I don't know what.
Yeah.
But I think the majority of stuff can be accounted for by pranking.
These kinds of bluffs and double bluffs occur all the time in this field, and if you're looking at Bigfoot or ghosts or UFOs or anything like that, you'll generally find that there is some kind of genuine phenomenon. A lot of attention is brought towards it, and then it kind of grows legs. And I mean, I know that people were accusing Janet and Margaret, as you mentioned, Andrew. They because of course they Deborah Hyde made this point. I don't think it's quite fair, but she made the point that these girls were being brought up by a single mother. They had very little contact with their father because the parents split up when they were very young, and having Maurice Grosse in the house, he became a kind of father figure to the girls. And then therefore there was this psychological need to keep him there, essentially, which is why there was all these things happening, but the television wasn't affected because in those days, the TV was the centre of the kids' entertainment. It's so.
I never really thought of it that way, actually, Ben. It's a good point.
I don't agree with that, but it's very often said that is the case.
Well, Maurice Grosse was kind of like a father figure. Interesting. I will say, and this is very anecdotal and it cannot be proven. I will say that there's a landlady that I know of a pub. She reckons that she is friends with the lollipop lady that was helping kids across the road outside the Enfield Poltergeist house when it was happening in the 70s. The lollipop lady claims that she could see through the window, the window of the bedroom, and she could see the kids actually levitating.
Wow.
That's anecdotal, but that's what I was told.
It's an independent witness, which is really, really great. As far as the case that Matt has brought up, we're dealing with a much older case from much further, long ago. I don't know enough about this particular incident and have enough knowledge about the history of the family and the incident, and indeed the man himself, John Wesley, who's essentially founded a religion. There's Wesleyans now everywhere. I mean, where my mother comes from in the Netherlands, there's she was from Limburg in the southeast, where they're Roman Catholic, but there's lots of different Protestant denominations. Nonconformist Protestantism is a big thing in the Netherlands, as it is in Wales, where my father, where I lived. So
what's Wesleyism?
Methodism. If you've heard Methodist, same thing, pretty much. Yeah. The interesting thing is that the phenomena took a break on December the 25th.
That's interesting.
And then,
what's special about the September the 25th? Sorry, I don't know enough about this case. Then.
December.
December. Oh, sorry, I thought you said September. Oh, right. So it took time off for Christmas. That's very handy.
And then they had the investigative vigil on the 28th, where they actually got somebody outside to look into this. That was the last time anything happened. And my thinking is basically that the couple, their daughter and the manservant, were the ones that were utilizing and creating some of the phenomena as a distraction in order to cover up their relationship, and it all got a little bit too hot. And what you'll find as well is that this particular daughter goes incredibly off the rails in terms of with men and stuff, ends up becoming pregnant and married off very quickly to a local plumber, and because she's seen as intellectually more superior to him, that relationship never carried on, and she ended up writing a whole pile of poetry which is very much against marriage and against some of the stuff that her father was. So I think this was a girl who was incredibly hormonal, and you've got a brand new guy that's just come in a month before to the family, and then all these phenomena start taking off.
Well, there's two questions. Sorry, Andy.
So I was just going to, this is a very quick point. With the hormones thing, and this might be relevant, it might not, poltergeist activity and paranormal activity tends to kind of happen when people are prepubescent or going into kind of hormonal changes.
Yeah, there is that's one of the theories of poltergeist. As you know, John Fraser has written Poltergeist, yeah. So he's got some good stuff on poltergeist, and he's one big box of paranormal tricks, which is his latest book, is one that is worth reading because it kind of lumps a lot of this stuff together. And I think hormones do act maybe as a magnet for some sort of stuff to start happening. I don't know. I don't think necessarily it's our hormones itself, but who knows? I mean,
it's
greater stuff than dreams are made of.
Well, it's like it's the hormones of the body changes cause psychological changes, which are said to be a part of this. I mean, the film, The Exorcist, which of course the target of this paranormal, this demonic possession is a young girl who's just entering puberty, and they always were saying that boys make worse babies and girls make worse teenagers. And being the father of a 30-year-old, which is now long in the past, I can attest to that. But it could be that whatever, if in terms of genuine, and when there are genuine phenomena, and some of the phenomena are genuine, they say they're attracted to certain kinds of people, because poltergeists tend to center around person rather than the place, and they're attracted to certain kinds of people. And very often it is a young person, usually a girl in early adolescence, who's experienced it. It could be just an energy. It could be like an energetic, psychological thing. I mean, it could be something like that. But there's two main questions I want to bring up, Matt. The first being the idea of distraction. Now, the idea that certain esoteric phenomena are essentially conjured up as some kind of neo-mythology to launder more earthly secrets, such as illicit affairs, it's not very original. In today, it's actually quite trendy, usually related to UFOs and their relationship between the government and the people. I do have a criticism of that. I mean, talking generally, I don't know, maybe in this specific case, it could be an exception. My general criticism of this idea is it can backfire so easily and so badly that I'm surprised it's used so often, because it can end up drawing more attention towards what you're trying to hide.
In modern day terms, yes, but this wasn't a phenomenon, really. I mean, you've got the Tedworth drummer, which had just happened. So I'm thinking that potentially that's on the grapevine, as it were, of gossip between village to village to village. But I think the reason why it stopped on the 28th was because this is getting too hot to handle. We're getting other people that are going to catch us out at this point. I think that's my own thinking on this. However, there were some other bits and pieces that happened, dancing knives on tables, that sort of stuff, which happened a few months later. But then that was it. There was nothing else.
It was kind of a resurgence, like that happened with Enfield. There was a minor resurgence a few months after the main phenomenon died down.
Weirdly, these things do happen in waves, and I've heard this, that it kind of builds up. It builds up quietly, and then you get a massive peak, and then for some reason, bafflingly, it just kind of drops away again.
Yes, that's what happened in this case.
Yeah.
Maybe that ties in though, like Matt's talked about the silence on the 25th of December. And maybe with other cases as well, there could be social things happening around their village or around the family, and obviously their attention is diverted to deal with that social, whatever it may be, a significant date, the 25th of December, or someone's birthday, someone's aunt is coming to visit, and things, the focus, whether it's they're deliberately stopping their activities because of that, they're distracted, or the power, if there's a psychic power that's causing it, subsides because the attention is focused on some other thing to take their mind off it. I don't know. It's an interesting thing, though.
It could simply be, just too many people in the house, unusual people in the house,
My mother did, sorry, before you go
carry on.
A second bit, I'm conscious you've got it in a second, but the mother did ask whatever it was not to disturb her during her prayers between 5 and 6, and it honoured that.
Oh, wow.
That's nice. That's a very. I mean, if ghosts are going to be that convenient, maybe they could do some housework as well.
Well, there is that. But what also is the father. I think she was a Jacobite, and the father was very much for William of Orange being the king. So there was some political tension, and in fact, the father had walked out for a year before this kicked off as well, and it had come back. So you've got a very fractured, fragile family dynamic going on there as well.
There's the idea that you get like a phenomenon which is then a hoax, which then gets out of hand. This does happen before. I mean, there were several real examples, probably too many to mention, the alien autopsy hoax and things like that. Sorry, Colin Wolford, but it is a hoax. And there's also in the case of the Fox sisters, the supposed inventors of spiritualism. And about 40 years after they first launched the movement, they then made a confession. Now, I think that confession was fabricated because basically their lives were falling apart as a result of their celebrity status, and their marriages were breaking down, things like this. But nevertheless, there was a they did come forward and say, look, this none of this is real. Can we just roll this back? Can we just please stop this?
You think they were pressured to by their husbands or their families?
I think they probably agreed. I mean, my view, having looked at the case, I think they probably agreed between themselves to make a false confession. Yeah.
The third sister actually was wanting them to carry on with it.
Oh, right. I think I know my third sister, but I've got another point I want to raise. But you go on. Cool. Sorry.
Okay, all right. I'll just say this about the Fox sisters because I actually cover them in my book, which is True Tales of the Paranormal, out now. Commercial break. So basically, I covered the Fox sisters, and although it appears that the phenomenon started with the Fox sisters, the house where they were, there was actually activity in that house before they ever moved in, and it occurred to the previous family that lived in the house. Yes. And then when the Fox sisters were taken away to like other neighbouring houses away from the phenomena, all the villagers assembled in the house, and they were still getting the phenomena in there without the Fox sisters being present, and they were asking questions of whatever was causing the disturbance. Like they said, "What is the age of my wife?" and it would click 36 times for years, 36 years. And they managed to work out a kind of code and sort of get some sort of communication going. And the Fox sisters weren't even present. So for them to confess it was all fake, I think was some sort of thing that they did under duress.
That's interesting.
Unfortunately, the house has gone now. I mean, I know somebody who actually went to the location. They know where it used to be, but unfortunately, the Fox sisters' house is now gone.
Were they American or English?
American.
Yeah.
There's another issue I want to bring up, and I mean, Matt's already touched on this, is we're talking about a very, very different kind of culture in those days, and a very different political landscape, because the secularism we have in our current world didn't exist. Politics and the church were intimately connected, and you've already touched on this, Matt. John Wesley, presumably, as you say, he was a founder of a new faith. I suppose in those days, before it took off, he may well have been dubbed a cult leader.
He wasn't so much a cult leader or a new faith. It's just a tradition within the non-conformism.
Right, but how did this phenomena aid or hinder his religious career?
It didn't. It had nothing to do with his religious career. It just didn't have any impact in that sense. He was already a believer in spirits and the afterlife anyway. So this whole thing that he was interested in, and he was kept on writing back and forth. We've got the letters, but it didn't really impact on his breaking away from the Church of England.
Right, I see. That's interesting because, I mean, of course, maybe again it's a sign of the times. But if you go to a church today and you ask the vicar about this, I mean, there are exceptions. I mean, of course, ASAP's president, Father Lionel Fanthorpe, is an exception to this. But generally, the clergy, it's not that they reject it; they just generally have no interest in. Some outwardly say you can't contact the spirits of the dead; they belong to God. Until the day of judgment, or when you die, you won't have any contact with them. I know, of course, like I say, it depends on the individual beliefs or the beliefs of the particular church. But generally speaking, I've found that the priesthood is not very open to this kind of thing.
I think, to be perfectly honest, the priesthood has been embarrassed by it. And it's either tried to pathologize it or psychologize it or demonize it, one of the three, rather than try and understand it. I mean, this is why after World War II and World War I, when people were having their apparitions of their loved ones visiting them, and their loved one had died in the Flanders fields or, far fields, and they were getting, on that night, messages and apparitions and visitations, the church, by and large, either pathologized it, you're ill, there's some mental illness, psychologized it, well, it was just all in your head, or demonized it, well, it was just an impersonation, it really wasn't your thing, it was just a demon. And as a result of that, a lot of people just went, well, no, the conversation that I had led to an increase in peace and joy and love. And these, if your listeners might have heard of something called the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. And they were going, well, this doesn't make sense because this was real. I know it was my husband. It wasn't an impersonation. And I'm sorry, but I'm going to go elsewhere for answers. And so they went to the spiritualist church, which said, yeah, of course it was your husband. Of course it was your son. And as a result, the church lost a lot of people after that, which is why the organisation I belong to, the Church's Fellowship for Psychical and Spiritual Studies, actually began in 1953 to address this paucity of knowledge about the afterlife and about those loved ones going into the afterlife, and how do we deal with these particular phenomena that are coming about. So, I mean, now we've got one of our patrons is Rowan Williams, who was the previous Archbishop of Canterbury. So we have got, there are a few good men, as it were, and women out there who really do accept in the church that this stuff is real, and you test these things. You make sure that you don't just leave the door open for anybody to come in, sort of stuff. And we kind of don't advocate running around trying to communicate with them, but where there are issues, where there's disturbances, where there is what we call the unquiet dead, where there's unresolved stuff, then we help people to understand this and reach out to clergy who are also sympathetic and can deal with this stuff in a way that is not just, I'm going to cast you to the pit of hell type American style. I mean, I myself am a member of the Midlands Deliverance Forum, so every year we get together a bunch of deliverance ministers. Now, they don't come in with their trench coats and their hats and their bag with their crucifixes in and all that. No, it's nothing like The Exorcist, and deliverance ministry itself is just, it's not what American-style evangelicalism portrays it as, shout it out and make a big stage show of it. It's quiet, it's peaceful, it's something that is taken seriously, and there's an intention to bring peace to both sides, rather than just cast it out and leave it to flit about, as it were. I mean, yeah, you will get something that they work as a multidisciplinary team anyway. So you've got psychologists, you've got social workers, you've got medical professionals, all of those. Each diocese, each region has got one team associated with it, and one person is authorised. And they eliminate everything that they can do on the scientific and the physical and the mental level. And if there's a decision at the very end that says some of the phenomena here are really not able to be explained scientifically, then we might be looking at a paranormal explanation for this. And that's the last limit, that's the last step when an exorcism would take place of a person. But you can get exorcism of place as well, and you can have minor and major exorcisms of both. So all of this.
What would be the difference between a minor and a major one?
Well, think of the difference between a minor illness and a major illness, and how you treat them. Yeah. So a major infestation of vermin, as it were, and you kind of can treat this as an infestation where you've got a lot of spirits that have come in and taken the opportunity to take advantage of somebody who's open and vulnerable to this sort of stuff, who's opened themselves up. I don't believe that they kind of just go, oh, I'm going to walk through this place and suddenly I'm going to get possessed. I don't think that happens at all. I think you have to open yourself up to this stuff to be able to, for a vector, to you have to, your attack surfaces have to be exposed for this stuff to come in.
What sort of ways would people opening up? I mean, the obvious is a Ouija board. Are there any other ways?
Well, I mean, if you intentionally try and open yourself up to something possessing you in order to be able to make contact, so you're giving your body over for something else to come in, I would say that is an open goal, as it were. Because for me, I wouldn't leave my front door open with a big sign saying "all welcome" on it.
Yeah.
that would be stupid. And then if that's what I would do with people that I can physically see, why would I not? Why would I do that for somebody or something that I can't physically see? See what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So stuff like that. I think obsession as well. I'm not just talking stamp collecting and that sort of malarkey, but an unhealthy obsession with something or someone can open you up to be like a magnet for something to feed off that. So it can be an obsession for all sorts of stuff. But
I'm in trouble.
There we go. I mean,
what I'm obsessed with is what we're talking about now.
Well, I mean, there's obsession and there's obsession, and I mean an unhealthy obsession. There's an interest in a hobby, yeah, and a hobby can get really, really intense. But when it's taking up all of your time and it's degrading other parts of your life, flourishing as a result, I would say that would be borderline on obsessiveness. It's not healthy. And I'm not saying all of that has a spiritual origin, but what I'm saying is it can open you up if it's certain obsession on certain things.
You mentioned the Archbishop being
Previous.
Ryan Williams. I think he's also a Druid.
Yeah, so he's a fraternal Druid. So he is Welsh. He came from the Church of Wales. So the Druids were holy people, and they have the Eisteddfod, and he is a Druid in that sense. I'm a member of OBOD.
Yeah.
So
I think where I'm going with this, and what I'd ask him is how does he balance and manage his Christian views and their version of things, and then the Druidic and the spiritualist-esque?
Well, Druidism is not a religion. Druidism is a way of thinking and a way of approaching life. So you've got three types of Druidry. You've got the Druidry that's the ancient Druids, which we know very little about apart from Tacitus. We've got the fraternal Druids, which are basically not religious. It's literally just things like the Eisteddfod and we are holy people, of that level. And then you've got modern neo-paganistic Druidry. So that's more to do with the umbrella of paganism with a capital P, not lowercase p, from ancient paganism times. So yeah, he's not a pagan Druid. He's not an ancient Druid. He is a fraternal Druid, part of his group. Sorry, no, he's a cultural Druid. That was it. The cultural Druids, the fraternal Druids, and the pagan Druids, and he is a cultural Druid.
It's fascinating that the church, I didn't know this actually, that the church is now, that is actually opening up itself up to this kind of thing. I mean, the whole idea of exorcisms and things like this. I mean, in the film, the Karen character in the film actually advises Regan's mother that he can't actually do this until he meets Max von Sydow's character, the priest, because he says, well, I'd have to take you back in 400 years in a time machine to get this done, he says, because we don't do this sort of thing nowadays. That I mean, I've noticed that the Muslim community has its own version because they believe very much in the jinn, and that the ideas of possession by, I know this because I was a hospital porter. I've known many Muslims. I was a hospital porter for 23 years, and they talk quite openly when you usually the hospital portering thing is like we tend to have very intimate discussions together. And they do describe the presence of the jinn, which are not demons. I mean, they're actually they're said to be existing in a parallel world made from smokeless fire that God created along with humans and things like this. And they're very often contained in some kind of container. In the, of course, Aladdin, it's a lamp, but it can be any. It's usually a bottle of some kind, but they can actually, under certain circumstances, possess. And again, there are psychological and mental conditions, and indeed sometimes physical conditions that can make you more susceptible to this. And Matt's already mentioned obsession. It can also, drug addiction and things like this can also affect you, which could be why many pubs are haunted, because there are people under the influence of alcohol in those locations, and it fascinates me that but maybe through pressure, because I mean, we mentioned earlier on about the people who went to spiritualism, how spiritualism essentially they filled a hole which the church couldn't. Mm-hmm. But there must be many people who, when they had these contact experiences with spirit, would have just suppressed them for the sake of going along to get along. I know a young woman from Alabama, USA, and in her community, it's actually considered antisocial not to go to church. And she goes to church. And I know that she has a lot of thoughts and feelings and says a lot of things to me that she wouldn't say to her family or people or friends or people around her. I mean, she's not a Christian believer. I'd say she's an agnostic. Mm-hmm. And she's essentially a deist or agnostic. Mm-hmm. And she's quite skeptical about a lot of things. But there must be many counterparts to her, and especially in the past.
No, I mean, I now know several vicars that see the dead.
Oh, wow.
Ah, interesting.
And one of them used to be a paramedic. So he was first on scene, and this couple were needing their husband to be taken into hospital. And as they're getting ready, he said, well, what are you going to do about your son? And they went, we haven't got a son. You have, it's at the top. He's at the top of the stairs. Wow. And they went, ooh, do. But I've also got, I mean, I know another church vicar that is able to astral travel, which would completely freak out a lot of certain types of Christians who think it's all demonic.
When you're astral traveling as a vicar, if you're astral traveling as a vicar, I'll just say this, then I'll go on to the astral travel thing, is that we talked about the Archbishop of Canterbury, back in the 1930s, and I can't remember the exact year, it was Archbishop Cosmo Lang, I think was the guy, Church of England one at the time. He actually launched an investigation. He ordered an investigation. You would know about this, Matt, but I'll just tell the benefit of the audience. He actually launched an investigation into Spiritualism, wondering why it was gaining popularity, and this committee of 6 or 8 people, I can't remember, looked into it over about 3 to 4 years or something like that. And they actually I think they came out in favour of basically extending the hand of friendship, so to speak, to spiritualists, and saying that we could probably work with them under, certain conditions, and they perhaps got something there that we should kind of look at seriously. But he suppressed the report for about 50 odd years. And
okay, yeah, I mean, go on.
Yeah, I was going to say, and but there's another end to that piece, is that he actually came through, if you believe it, of course, the mediumship of a guy called Leslie Flint, who was a direct voice medium. And he, along with many other people, over a period of like 30 years, basically came through this ectoplasmic voice box to talk about life on the other side, as it were. And the original report that was suppressed by him eventually made its way to Psychic News newspaper or magazine, and they published it some years later, and that's how it's become known today. But aside from that, I was just interested. I was going to ask a question, but obviously come back to me on whatever. But I was just really curious about the vicar that astral travels, and what kind of things does he see over there?
Well, he saw his recently passed dog, for one thing. That was the conversation that opened up for it. I don't know much about anything else that he's seen, but I know that when we were talking about it, he'd just lost his dog. He said, I was able to visit my dog on the other side.
Wow.
So, yeah. In terms of the Spiritualism report, that took about 3 years to create. It was commissioned November 36, but it was put into the big bishops' council, as it were, for 1939. But the problem is, it wasn't suppressed so much. There was a bit of suppression because what happened was the report split into two. There was a major report and a minority report. One of the people that was involved in it originally was a person called Evelyn Underhill, who is quite a famous Anglican Christian mystic. She started off on the report and then pulled out afterwards, saying that people were just too gullible with certain things. But incidentally, Evelyn Underhill was a good friend of Tolkien, and we reckon that it's probably the reason why Mr. Underhill is called Mr. Underhill for Frodo Baggins, because of Evelyn Underhill, yeah. But anyway, but it wasn't so much suppressed as what happened is World War II came along and they got bigger fish to fry at that point. but then it was kind of like slowly buried, and left, and other stuff came, and it took about 40 years. But then they allowed the full text to be published in the Christian Parapsychologist Journal, which I just happened to be the editor for, back in June 1979. So they reprinted the report, but they reprinted both reports because only one report was leaked, the major report. The minority report was leaked. The major report wasn't leaked. So the bit that the psychic magazine,
Psychic News, I think,
News only got part of the report. They didn't get the major report side of things. So as a result of that, what we did is we brought together both reports with a foreword, talking about the origin as well. And I mean, you can get that off the Church's Fellowship website. It's available. I did all of the typesetting and printing for it.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, that was another of my lockdown projects.
So I knew the lockdown had to be good for something. I mean,
it was a blessing. It was an absolute blessing.
I mean, you see, Richard Dawkins runs something he calls the Clergy Project, because he apparently has met many vicars who, when speaking privately, will say, "Look, I don't really believe this anymore, but it's my job now."
Really?
And so he goes,
Yes, he goes through Evensong.
Yeah, they go through the motion of being the priesthood without actually having any real faith. However,
to get a free house.
Yeah,
salary.
Exactly. They get the vicarage and exactly. But Dawkins is very, in his usual sort of like very narrow-minded way. He's very clear that he wouldn't. This is a very binary thing for him. He's dealing with priests who have become atheomaterialists, not priests who astral travel. I think that he
would tolerate that.
Reject that. Yeah, he would reject priests who believe in ghosts and astral travel.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a sign though that there is this kind of like facade that goes on in religion these days. And whichever religion you're talking about that has an orthodoxy, and outside that and even within it, there is like a shadow of individuals who operate very much outside that, and it probably has always been the case. There's always been cunning folk in every community, even during the time of the witch hunts and things like that. I mean, they would be every village would have a person like this. It was someone who lived on the periphery of the community, usually elderly, usually female, who would be liked by the community but not accepted, and people go to her for healing and for advice and for divination and for fortune telling and things like this. This is where, of course, the idea of witches comes from. Witch simply comes from Wicca, which is an old English word for a wise woman. Nothing to do with the neo-pagan Wicca as such, although it was inspired very much by that. So we're dealing with an underbelly that's always existed. That's always existed in our culture or in our society. Every country must have this at some point. It's in some part of their life.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's a really interesting subject. It really, really is.
I mean, what I was researching for my book was ancient witchcraft, so ancient magic. So I've been doing a ton of reading some really interesting materials, including Akkadian stuff on how to summon the dead. Thank you, Irving Finkel, for that one.
Right, I think on that note, we better take a break.
I was going to say, Neil, I wonder what caused the priests and the vicars to doubt their faith, or was it a sudden thing, or was it a gradual thing? I wonder what was going on there. And I wonder how many out there actually don't believe what they're doing and have a crisis of conscience. How can I purport all of these beliefs, in my congregation and not believe it myself?
Yeah, there is a guy, I read his book some years ago, that he wrote a book. He plays a piano. He's American. He used to be an evangelical guy, but he plays a piano. He used to write religious songs and things like that, but all the time he was having doubts and things. And now he's an absolute skeptic on the side of the skeptics and debates with these American religious people and stuff on the platform. I forget his name now, but very interesting to see those debates. Right, I think we better have a break here on the Paranormal Peep Show. We've been chatting just over an hour now. We're talking to Matt Arnold about ghosts and ghoulies and the Christian faith, which we'll be covering more of in part 2. So stay tuned for the Paranormal Peep Show on the Paranormal UK Radio Network.
Today's the best day of my life! Woohoo! Listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network.
Join Andy and Neil every month on the Paranormal Peep Show, part of the Paranormal UK radio network, for fun, frolics and lots of information about weird stuff, UFOs, ghosts and things that go bump in the night and everything associated with them. Fascinating guests, fascinating talk, fascinating information.
Hi, welcome back to the Paranormal Peep Show on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. We're out on YouTube and also Spreaker on the Paranormal UK Radio Network, and you can also listen to us on the website there as well. Now, we've been discussing all sorts of things in part one, from ghosts haunting houses and Christians and that kind of stuff, and we're still on that subject. We're going to expand into that area a little bit. I thought I'll just plug my book here for anyone that's interested. This is True Tales of the Paranormal, published in October this year, 2024. And I wrote this initially at the beginning of lockdown, but it was kind of a 10-year kind of story in the happening, really. So lockdown provided the excuse for me to actually put pen to paper, as it were. And Matt, we were just talking in the break there about your own book that you've been writing. You said it was actually part of a longer project, though.
Yeah, so I'm just going to bring up mine as well. The Invisible Dimension, Spirit Beings, Ghosts in the Afterlife. So this was a project that came out of my master's thesis, which was at a Methodist college, funnily enough, in Derbyshire, called Cliff College. And my MA tutor at the time, fairly evangelical guy, he looked at my proposal, looked at my chapter headings, and went, well, it's either going to be a first or a fail, Matt. So I thought, right, okay, your challenge accepted. So that was back in probably January 2019 when I gave him the chapter headings, and we had that conversation. And I had to submit it in September 2019. So there was a lot of work went into that, and I ended up with 82%, which got me a distinction overall. And the college, because of the high nature of the mark, they actually awarded the first ever master's dissertation prize. So I collected that. Thank you very much.
Well done.
And then, having been made redundant from the Church of England in August 2019, I was in a bit of a limbo. I took the month out in September to finish off the dissertation. Then October came along, and I ended up going into supply teaching, which I am still a supply teacher. I am a physics teacher by background. But then lockdown hit in March 2020, and I got all this time on my hands. And so I thought, well, what can I do with this time? I've been blessed with excellent weather, and I'm getting paid for sitting at home. I can't do a lot else. What do I do? So I thought, well, I really enjoyed doing the master's research for this. And it would be a shame to just let that go, especially when it was 82%. They said roughly, if it's 80% or above, this thing you need to sort of look at doing a book about. So I started my website, ghostsghoulsandgod.co.uk, which was a series of articles on looking at the paranormal in the Bible, in the biblical texts, and taking a back to basics approach. What did the original writers mean when they wrote the words? Not as a post-Reformation, 1500 years after sort of like Jesus was around. What did the original writers mean by the words that they used for ghost? And there's different words for ghosts and spirits in the Bible. And then the research went further with a couple of instances of even C.S. Lewis of Narnia fame. He had himself in visitation by his wife, his departed wife, Joy, and he's a Christian. And then a Bible translator called J.B. Phillips had a visitation twice from C.S. Lewis after he passed away within a few weeks, encouraging him to carry on with his Bible translation. Now, this is before the internet, so this is before sort of people could swap stories dead quick. And also one on the Epworth Rectory poltergeist, as we said previously, and one on the Exorcism of Gottlieb Benedictus by this 19th century Lutheran pastor called Johann Blumhardt, who really, his story inspired me to research this stuff, because he deals with spirits not as evil demons, but as people. He discovers that some of these people are possessing one of his parishioners. And, of course, there are non-human spirits as well involved, but there are a lot of human spirits. And the way he deals with them, well, he tries to send... he does send one to his church so she can listen to his sermons, which is a bit of a novel approach. He sends some to go in the garden. And he takes a more pastoral approach with those that are possessing, because he sees them as actually being under influence of something that is more dark and nefarious and non-human, which he also eventually manages to get out of this girl. So I did all of that research, put it online, carried on developing other bits and pieces, and then I was having a walk through Fountains Abbey in, I think it's North Yorkshire, and was chatting away with this guy, this American couple who'd come over, and he was an author, and he got loads of questions about the afterlife from a Christian perspective, because he's a Christian, and I was able to sort of like answer them and give him sensible answers, not knee-jerk, oh, it's all demons, or things like that he'd been used to. And he said, Matt, you need to put this into a book. I'll have a word with my publisher. So he did, and contract came along, and 18 months after that, the book was handed over. I handed the book over, and it took 18 months of editing, and then it was released in March this year, I think. So, yeah, so The Invisible Dimension. Great book.
Brilliant.
You mentioned you worked with the Church of England. I think I missed that bit, or maybe didn't. We might not have covered it. What was your role within the Church of England?
So I was what's called a lay pioneer minister. So I didn't have a collar. I didn't go to theological college to be trained to be a vicar or anything like that. What happened was that I used to do something called Forest Church, which was, I think the best way to describe it is a pagan-style, Christ-centered church that met in the woods.
Sounds good.
Celebrated the Wheel of the Year.
Why not?
We would have lots of pagans coming along as well as Christians, and it was a new style of church that it was an experimental thing that we were trying. And they said, right, well, we want to headhunt you. We'll bring you in, put you in an ex-mining village and see what you can come up with. So I'm in an ex-mining village in Nottinghamshire as a lay pioneer minister. And what we ended up coming up with, because of the listening process, rather than doing a top-down approach, which is what most churches do, I was doing a bottom-up approach. Where is God already at work in your community, rather than I'm bringing God to you? I think God's already there, because I believe God's in everybody. So how is he manifesting? How is God manifesting in your life, in the things that you do? And we discerned that the factors that were controlling the village were oppression, division, and worthlessness. These were the main things that were controlling the dynamics within the village. So we worked in opposition completely to that. We wanted to give people worth. We wanted to bring people together. We wanted to make them not oppressed, but rise up and be able to take control of things themselves. And so we ended up creating something called Plesley Community Orchard. So we took a third of an acre of dog toilet with one wall that the kids could kick a ball at, and that was what you've got, kids. Yeah. Wow. And we turned it into a fully working orchard with 70-odd trees, a big outdoor classroom. We had wassailing in there, where people were told how we showed people to bless the land and how the land would bless them in return. We had carols singing with the kids making willow lanterns that would come down into the orchard from their school and sing carols at the houses. We did Apple Day, where the kids would bring apples the mums would chop them up, the mums and the nans would chop them up, the kids would mash them up, and then the dads would and the granddads would twist the stuff around, and it would create a community. And yeah, it was fantastic. Maypole dancing, I went and learnt how to do it, and then taught the kids at school, and then we had the lads and dads and the mums all joining in. It was great fun. So yeah, what I was doing, I was actually in the community, bringing the God flavours out, the things that are already good in the community, enhancing them. That was my philosophy.
And this was like, I don't know if this is the right word, either ordained or given permission to by the Church of England.
Given permission to by the Church of England, yeah.
Interesting. So my question would be, given that, because that's very kind of like open and free and liberal and almost kind of like nature loving, did you clash with anybody within the C of E in terms of how you present this and what you're doing?
No, of course not. No, everybody loved it. Everybody thought it was fantastic. Yeah, I mean,
brilliant. Okay. No, I thought there might be some old school traditionalists like, no, we don't do that kind of thing. It's got to
I was called the pagan vicar. Who's kind of like one of the big cheeses in the deanery, which is a group of churches in the area. So I was called the pagan vicar, which I thought was interesting because I wasn't a pagan and I wasn't a vicar.
So, I mean, my background, I'm into the psychic and mediumship side of things, and my philosophy is akin to spiritualism, but I wouldn't tack my colours onto spiritualism. But that's kind of
what I said. Yeah.
Say again, Neil?
That's exactly what I said to Matt earlier. Yeah.
So I'm kind of like, the closest thing I would find would be kind of spiritualism as into what I'm into. So most, I don't know about most, but a lot of people on the Christian side or the Church of England side, or certainly the Catholic side, would view what I'm doing as either working with the devil or working with demons and blah, blah, blah. Now, I think there's both. I think there's angels, there's God, there's demons, there's humans as well. And I don't like it when everyone's all love and light and it's all fluffy and angels and all white light. But I also don't like it when you get the ghost hunting shows, it's all demons and it's all dark. It's not. It's
pagans.
It's layers of different things going on. So what would you say that the Bible says in terms of working with spirits and what spirits are and what's out there? I know it's a huge question, but can you summarize it?
Do you want me to go Matthew Hopkins, suffer not or which live? Because I'm not going to do that. So it gives, you have to know the context of what various words mean in order to be able to understand what is forbidden. The first thing I would say, though, is you wouldn't forbid something that's not possible to do.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
God wouldn't forbid us walking 100 foot in the air if it wasn't possible to do. We can't do it, so God doesn't forbid it. I mean, the laws of gravity will get you down over that one anyway.
Yeah.
So you've got in the ancient times, at the time that these laws were being developed about things like communication with the dead, the idea of the Israelites was, we are to only look to Yahweh, our God, as being the one that we have knowledge about the future. Necromancy is what's forbidden in the Bible, rather than just talking to the dead. So it's deliberate summoning up of the dead via spirit possession.
Right.
So you basically, what you've got, and the biggest example of this is a whole chapter dedicated to it called 1 Samuel chapter 28, which is Saul and the often called witch of Endor, but she wasn't a witch as such, not in the modern day meaning of the word witch anyway. She was in the Hebrew, it's Baalat Ishath Ov, which is a mistress of the Ov. The Ov is a ghost, so OB with the O has got a little circumflex on it. It's an ancestral spirit. If you look at the academic materials, a brilliant book is the Dictionary of Deities and Demons in the Bible. It's nearly 1,000 pages thick, and it is not Llewellyn Publishing. It is it's Brill Publishing, and Brill are the academics type, of this stuff. So it's a load of academic material on it. So what was being forbidden was having a spirit enter you, a spirit of the dead. Now, the reason why is because, ritually speaking, anything to do with the dead would make you unclean. And being unclean meant you couldn't do the sacrifices and the various bits and pieces at the temple. You weren't allowed to go in. So by having some spirit within you, you wouldn't be able to be part of the national religion that was taking place. So you would be cast out. Plus also, it was seen as, again, you've got the archetypal witch type stuff, black magic and all that sort of, it was seen as deviant at the time. So there's a lot of polemic against talking necromancy, and the reasons why is because we've got one spirit within us which is ours, and having another one in there at the same time can cause mental issues for one thing. And we see that where we've got a guy called the demoniac in Book of Mark, chapter 5, where you've got the legion, which is the band of spirits that are called legion. It has a mouthpiece, as it were, that's called legion. Appears in lots of modern literature, including Red Dwarf has an episode of Legion in it.
I was just going to say, because you mentioned the Oath of Endor. Isn't Endor the Ewok planet?
It certainly is, yes. Different planet, and that one's a long time ago in a galaxy far away. But this Endor is we know where Endor is in the Middle East now, and there's a well there, and if you put yourself in the mindset of an ancient, the mountains were where the gods lived. You couldn't climb. I mean, we're not talking like Ben Nevis or something like that. We're talking 10,000 foot plus mountains, very rarefied air. The gods lived in the mountains. Humans lived on this Middle Earth. Tolkien didn't invent this. And then the valleys were seen as the opposite. So the entrances, the caves, entrances to the underworld. And so you've got well as well that is also seen as going down into the ground. It would have been seen as an entrance to the underworld. So we think we know where this woman was residing, and basically she would have used her ancestral spirit to go down into the underworld to collect the spirit of the person that you were supposed to be trying to contact, and then the two would come up together.
Yeah,
and you would do the dialogue. We kind of have a similar idea of we've got an idea of what she did from an Akkadian tablet that talks about using Shamash, which is the one of the Sumerian gods, is the big cheese god, and he would be the one that would be able to facilitate the whole affair of going down, bringing up the dead again. And she was using psychotropic materials, so you'd make a salve, you put it on your eyelids, and you would be able to see into the other realm. And that's how they were using. That's another way of being able to enhance their psychic vision as well.
Interesting. So they're not actually saying that you can't speak to the dead. They're just saying that you can't allow them to possess within you.
It's more about possessing, and it's more about initiating deliberate contact to know about the future.
Right.
That's the specifics of it. It would be wrong. It would be hypocritical, because Jesus in Matthew 17 speaks to the deceased Moses and the Mount of Transfiguration. So Jesus talks to the dead when he talks to a little girl who's died and then raises her back to life again. And the various places in the Bible where talking to the dead and bringing them back to life occurs. So, talking to the dead is a thing, but it's about testing. There's not just accepting anything that comes through to you.
Yeah.
It's about what is coming through. Is it true to what we know?
Yeah.
And does it increase in us those fruits of the spirit that we talked about? And or does it sort of like lead me more on a path of dependency on a particular person for more information? And of course, we've seen that happens in more, I'm going to be uncharitable, charlatan type mediumship. If you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
There are genuine mediums and there are charlatans. And I would say, just where is your dependency coming on? If you found peace and then you don't need to keep going back, there's a different thing to I need to keep going back, and more and more and more.
Interesting. Yeah, I would agree with the discernment thing as well. I would very much advise people against just opening the door and just allowing anything in. Discernment is absolutely key. What's really interesting when you talk about kind of looking at the different words and the meanings of them. Have you heard of Jordan Maxwell? And you're aware of Jordan Maxwell's work? He's very into kind of like the ancients and depictions and things of kind of how the ancients view spirituality and Christianity. He basically says that the original Hebrew word for God was actually the guards, which is really interesting. Plural, the guards.
Mean Elohim?
Possibly. Possibly. I don't know. I don't speak Hebrew. I don't quite know. But he seemed to think that over time it's been changed, and it's been kind of the language has been changed. And he's basically saying the guards created mankind, plural, which is interesting.
No, I mean, what you do have... Sorry.
I was going to say, just to sort of touch in on there, that it does talk about, in Genesis, God says, we shall create mankind in our own image.
Yeah.
There's a plural there, isn't there?
Yeah, Elohim, the im bit is plural.
Yeah. Because Jordan Maxwell, he didn't just kind of conjure this up out of nowhere. Jordan Maxwell, he's passed on now, bless him. But he spoke to a lot of rabbis, and he spoke to them kind of behind closed doors when they're away from their synagogues. And he said, "What do you really believe? What do you think's really going on?" And they opened up to him, and they had dialogue and a conversation. And it turns out that what they really meant in the very, very first editions of the Old Testament was the guards or the gods. And I think
gods I'd go with the gods. Yeah. I'd go with, not the guards.
Yeah, he seemed to think the guards, but it could be either. So why have we got this plural? This is the thing.
Yeah. So what you've got within the biblical text, if you look at Psalm 82, it actually, if you look at the Hebrew, and you could do this on Bible Hub, so BibleHub.com. Has an interlinear, so you can see the English and you can see the Hebrew or the Greek if you go for the New Testament. And you'll see in there, Elohim takes his seat amongst the Elohim. So you've got there Elohim being used twice. One is used for the uncreated Elohim, and one is used for the created Elohim. Then what we've got to understand is the word Elohim doesn't actually just refer to one being. It's basically the Hebrew for spirits. I mean, you've got ruach as well, which is another word for spirit. But Elohim is like an umbrella term for spirits. Now you have one in the Judeo-Christian. You've got one uncreated Elohim, and we normally put that with a capital E. And then you have created Elohim, which are with a lowercase e, and those little lowercase Elohim is gods. So you've got God taking his seat amongst the gods. You have this concept called the divine council. And the divine council is not a pantheon as such, but it's where pantheon type ideas come from. The Canaanites also had El, and El was the Elyon was the God Most High, and then you would have El Shaddai, I can't remember any of the others.
Where does Yahweh fit in?
Well, Yahweh is the Hebrew name for El, basically.
Right.
Kind of like almost the same entity, or same understanding ideas. Kind of got these ideas, but they're given different names. So the Israelites would go, we believe in Yahweh, but we also recognize that it is God Most High, El Elyon. So your El Elyon, Canaanites, your God Most High, we would call Yahweh. And then you've got things for Yahweh coming from Midianite times, from I think a storm god type things as well, and god of metalworking. That was it. So when you've got that thing in Genesis where it says, "Let us make man in our own image," and women as well, male and female, he created that. What's going on in there is a bit like me saying, "Right, Neil, Ben, Andrew, let's get some pizza. Okay?
Pepperoni.
I'll do the ordering, but we'll get some pizza.
Right.
Yeah. So it's let us make man in our image. Let us make humans in our image. But the Elohim, the uncreated one, is the one that creates them. Whereas these other ones, these divine council members, God runs a bureaucracy basically.
It's very much hierarchical. Yeah.
Yeah. And so these ones are kind of like Tolkien's Einar Lindeley at the beginning of the Silmarillion. Very much Tolkien riffs off this whole divine council idea with the Valar and the Maya, and Ilúvatar being the creator god, and then you've got Melkor being the rebellious spirit, as it were, that's the Satan figure. So that's what's going on there. You have got other gods within these within the Jewish, well, it's not Jewish by that point, the Hebraic understanding, but they were the gods of the nation. So I think if you go to Deuteronomy 32, 8 and 9 and 17, you will see there that God appoints over the different nations, the 70 nations, these members of the divine council. And Israel is Yahweh's portion. So Israel, the God of Israel, is Yahweh. And what happens is you get these gods rebelling against Yahweh. And if you read the book of 1 Enoch, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the book of 1 Enoch.
Yeah.
So the book of 1 Enoch basically is fanfic, apocalyptic sci-fi from about the 2nd to 1st century BC, where they're trying to explain what was going on with these fall of the rebellious creatures, the rebellious gods. And what's happening is that you get these ideas that they were given tasks to give to humans, to lead humans in, like agriculture, metallurgy, and things like that. But they twisted their ways to become worshipped themselves. And so metallurgy turns into weapons manufacturer. So all of this kind of stuff takes place just before the Noahic flood, where you then end up with this hybridization going on, where some of these are wanting to mate with human beings and have their own children, their own sons of them, as it were. And so, yeah, all of that really gets mad. If you really want to get into this, there's a book called The Unseen Realm by Michael Heiser. And he's a Hebrew, a scholar, is a PhD of Semitic languages, and he's gone through the Akkadian and the Sumerian and the Hebraic materials, and pulled all of the academic works together and said, well, actually, this is what was going on at that point in time. And he deals with the things like the Anunnaki and all of that sort of stuff, rather than do it as a ancient aliens approach, where we just see a pattern and then we extrapolate massively from it. He says, well, let's see what the actual materials themselves say in their original languages. And it comes out as a very different thing to George T. of Ancient Aliens.
I was going to ask you about the Nephilim and the
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, on my website, I look at the Nephilim and all that sort of stuff.
Do you think they're coming back?
Well, so here's a pet theory. I mean, if you look at 1 Enoch, so this is me speculating now. If you look at 1 Enoch's the Jews, because it was at the time the Jews, trying to explain why there was this Noahic flood. And what they say is, and this is possibly from oral tradition, these beings were the offspring of this hybridization, were giants that were consuming vast amounts of resources of the earth, and the earth was crying out as a result. The earth itself was suffering, in the physical earth was suffering, as also were human beings. We were also suffering. And so this is why the Noahic flood happened, to kind of wipe out that region where these hybrids were taking place and destroying a lot of, the animals, everything was just a complete mess. It was all twisted and supposedly a real mess. Now, if you look at today, are there gods of the nations today? and what is consuming vast amounts of the Earth's resources in order to accomplish a lot for a very few people. So if you see the news today, AI, these AI companies are buying nuclear power stations to be able to power these energy-hungry material computer systems. So things like this, maybe the gods of today are that which are taking over all of our lives and consuming vast amounts of resources in the process.
There's something that there's a friend of mine who she does writing, and she kind of like she believes she channels angels and higher beings, and a lot of the information comes through is quite positive. Have you heard of the name Gonal before? Okay, just thought I might ask that one. And have you heard of anything mentioned to do with colours? And I don't mean the chakra system, the New Age chakra system, putting that aside. Colours to do with white and red and green, and basically the essence of our souls being associated with colours. Is that anything you've come across before?
I've heard of colour symbolism in dreams and how we can interpret dreams in colour symbolism. I mean, there's a lot of Jungian stuff in that.
Okay.
And archetypal things like, but that is really interesting because red in Western culture tends to mean death and bloodshed and things. But if you go to Eastern culture like China, red, you have a red letter day, it's a really good thing. Whereas white in the West is holy and purity. White in China and Japan is death.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. So there are very subjective things on what these colours mean.
Ben, do you want to ask anything?
Yeah, this is really interesting stuff. I mean, you mentioned earlier on C.S. Lewis, and this is somebody it's almost a very obvious individual I should have thought of earlier, really. I didn't know that about how he saw Joy Davidman after she died. I mean,
he sensed her presence.
He sensed her presence. You see, this is very, very common with people who are bereaved. I mean, skeptics and psychologists will put it down to the grief process. They'll say, "Well, it's a phantom. It's a mental phantom you imagine." But it sometimes involves other objective phenomena, such as the instrumental transcommunication, which is very common. Things like that. The EVP, phone calls from the dead, kind of thing. By the way, the book Phone Calls from the Dead is a PDF on the Internet Archive. You'll be glad to know. Get it while you can.
I was going to say, Sal Cooper has just released it this year.
Oh, right. So it's a new edition. It's a new edition. Right.
It's just down the road from me. So
excellent. Because
had it on the show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I think maybe thinking about different. There's another one by two authors that came out in the 70s. Maybe
Rogo.
Yeah, Rogo and the other guy. Yeah, that's the one.
Something.
I can't remember but I can't remember both. There's two authors, but that's on Internet Archive. It's out of print, and there's very expensive copies going around. But it's a fascinating read. But in terms of C.S. Lewis, I mean, this is the story that it's told in the Shadowlands movie with Anthony Hopkins. It's a good film. That he met this woman from this American lady who he married. But I mean, I didn't know that, and indeed the fact that he came back, he died instantly on the 22nd of November 1963.
Assassination.
Yeah, the same day as the Kennedy. This is why it wasn't really covered much in the news. Interestingly, funnily enough, what's his name died the same day. Aldous Huxley died the same day, which is a bit weird. Very strange thing. Very spooky that. But he came back and appeared as a spirit. I mean, he was open to this sort of thing. I mean, he was an open-minded guy, and his Christian devotion didn't stop him being open-minded. I mean, this is, I think, one of the lessons of this discussion is that even there's people on the New Age side and the neo-pagan side who actually seem to be far more closed-minded than a lot of Christians. One lady I knew, she was the kind of neo-pagan type character. She said if she found out someone had gone to church, she says, "I want nothing to do with that person."
But that's ridiculous, isn't it? It's ridiculous.
Well,
she was always the one who was complaining about the lack of open-mindedness in society to her beliefs. So think she should have looked in the mirror. There's a bit of projection there.
I have to say that the Nottingham Pagan Network I've been a member of since 2013, 2014. So 10 years. I've spoken at their things. I've spoken at Pagan Pride UK, which so the openness and the welcome that I've had has been fantastic.
They have the interfaith network.
That's excellent.
Yeah, I've heard that through various pagan things. Yeah.
Could you say more about the appearance of C.S. Lewis?
Okay, yeah.
After his
So
death?
after his death, so J.B. Phillips is a Bible translator. He's translating from the King. Before J.B. Phillips came along, all we had was the King James. These, thous, thou shalt not, thou shalt, and this, that, and the other. Old English, you had to be fairly Shakespearean to understand what the words meant, and a lot of the words were dead by this point, or false friends. So he's working on a modern translation into modern English of the New Testament, and he's struggling and finding it really quite difficult. So he sat there one day watching the telly, and this is corroborated by his wife, who was later, some decades later, confirmed that to somebody that this definitely did happen. He said, I was sitting there, and then suddenly Lewis appeared to me, radiant, full of life, and he just said, it's not as difficult as you think it's going to, I think it is. And that encouraged him to keep going, and he had a second visitation sometime later from Lewis again encouraging him. Now, a lot of my friends will go, oh, well, it's demons, isn't it? I'll go, well, it's a bit of an own goal, isn't it? If they're going to be creating a Bible translation that's kind of, going to put them out of a job, as it were.
This idea. This is the thing. That this might be the motivation for some of the hostility you might get from certain quarters. It's because the heaven is the Orthodox religions have a particular vision of the afterlife, and usually there's certain individuals who are invested, shall we say, institutionally in people believing in it, which includes obviously I don't want to sound cynical, but obviously there's a lot of money involved in these things, quite a lot often.
Has anyone heard that the American original Bill of Rights was not exactly channeled, but was inspired, I suppose, by a spiritual communication of such? Has anyone heard that? That was apparently a thing.
No, I know that one of the families
inspired is probably the better word.
The flag was actually the US flag, the original flag, which actually had a panopticon eye on it. That was actually delivered to, I forgot who designed it, one of the founding fathers, by what he describes as a sort of shadow being. It actually appeared in his garden one night.
Yeah. I
don't have the details.
The new flag or the old flag?
It's not the current US flag. There was an original flag that was designed before the revolution that actually had a panopticon on it. And it does appear, it's this symbol that appears on the dollar bill, essentially.
So you talk about the Illuminati eye.
The Illuminati pyramid is called. Although they didn't use that, they didn't call it that when it was created, but it's often used as a symbol for the Illuminati. But that was actually on the first design, the first draft design for the American flag.
I think it's also on the French, either the French Constitution, or I've seen something that's French, because of course there's a lot of linking between France and America for whatever reason, like the French Freemasons sent over the Statue of Liberty. Something was pointed out to me recently that's really concerning. With the American Statue of Liberty that was given by French Freemasons to America, the ankle has got a chain on it. Did you know that?
No, but this sort of thing just. Of course, I mean, there's no doubt that George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, all these people were involved in secret society networks. Benjamin Franklin was a member of the Hellfire Club that used to meet in some caves not far from where I live, actually. And I do know that the eye, you see, the eye is a symbol. I mean, it's used. I've been going back to Tolkien. Tolkien used the eye of Sauron as this eye that's on the top of the tower that sees all, and through walls, through land, through flesh, and things like this, and through the ring, it has the ability to control Frodo and anyone else.
Palantir.
Yeah, the Palantir. Of course, it appears in the Palantir. It's and you find it in fiction. You find it everywhere because there's this phrase: "The eye is the window on the soul." We know that if you're communicating with someone and you don't look into and you don't make eye contact, it's uncomfortable. Yeah. I know that when I was interviewed by the police after I was arrested, I was very careful not to make eye contact with them because I wasn't in trouble. I mean, they let me go. But
remind me what you arrested for?
I was held in suspicion of violent disorder, which I was innocent of. But I mean, while I was being interviewed, I was careful not to look into their eyes, because you can give information out just very few micro expressions in your iris and things like this. So, it's interesting that one's actually appeared in that way. That it appeared on the flag in that way. I mean,
it does make sense because the whole of American establishment is very, very based on symbolism. If you have a look at, they're obsessed with 13 for some reason. When you've got the eagle and it's clutching 13 arrows, and you've got 13 stripes or whatever it is. Everything's got symbolism behind it.
Washington DC itself is an incredible. It's almost like it's an incredible thing. I mean, you could say the same for Paris. Paris is the even bigger example. Like when Baron Haussmann redesigned Paris, it has a lot of that same these strange features in the architecture and things like that. I don't know how we got onto this subject from this, but you're talking about. I think it was from the phone calls from the dead and the fact that the. So I segue back, Andy. Sorry.
I can't remember where I heard it from, but somebody was talking about the original Constitution, and the idea for the amendments was either sort of channeled or inspired in some kind of spiritual way, whether it came in a dream or whether it was kind of like a thought process that was downloaded. But I suppose where I'm going with this is like there are some occasions where positive things can kind of come through and channel through people, whereas like darker things, I can't remember what we talked about, the shadow being with the eye, I would see that as more on the dark side personally.
Both good and bad things can come from channeled information, indeed neutral things.
Yeah.
I mean, the story we told about the US Constitution is not unusual. There's other examples as well. And we know very well that Jews and Muslims have their own law, which is like the Jews have the Beth Din, which is their court, and the Qadi, the Muslims have the Qadi, the councils of the Sharia. These are legal systems that are gifts from God. Therefore, but people believe in them, people use them. They're completely unofficial. They have no, except perhaps in some countries like maybe in Saudi Arabia or in Israel or places like. No, even in Israel, Israel has a secular constitution, but I know there are theocracies of various kinds. But these things that are described as channeled, and we know that Muhammad himself was shown a golden book, or a book full of information. And Graham Hancock says that this, this became the Holy Quran. And Graham Hancock said in his book Supernatural, that is another common feature where someone who is shown information in like a book, usually with pages made of gold. Another one is
Mormonism.
Yeah, I was just thinking. You took the words right out of my mouth. Joseph Smith. He dug. He reports that he was on a farm and he dug a hole in the ground, and there was this golden book, and there was an angel that showed him this. The fact that he was bankrupt and his house, his farm was about to be mortgaged, influenced him slightly. But I don't want to sound too cynical, but I mean, it's a recurring theme throughout history that the world we live in, it has this background to it, which is spiritual. Whichever country you're in, whether it's a religion, whether it's a state, you find these backgrounds to them, which are a spiritual dimension. Yeah,
no, I think that's in. I mean, since the Enlightenment, we've had this disenchantment of the world, with scientism taking over, like Dawkins and that. But actually, when you look at the data from research, from polling, we are actually going back to a re-enchanted magical world, where people have had enough of, we're just a collection of atoms, meaningless collection of atoms. But actually, we have got purpose and meaning beyond the physical nature that we are.
I can attest to that, actually, because I've always taken a strong interest in skeptics and the skeptic movement. I actually went to a skeptic conference a couple of weeks ago. There is something, in a sense, they believe they've broken free from all belief systems. Yet they have a belief system.
They've created their own. They've got a hierarchy.
Absolutely. Although, I mean, skepticism itself, genuine skepticism, is a thing to be applauded. You don't believe everything that you're told. You have to be skeptical. What I found is that skepticism has more now become cynicism.
I should clarify by my meaning of using the word, actually, because, of course, the way, and it's actually the skeptics themselves who don't understand this, because they don't have they seem to lack the introspective abilities to understand themselves. They will say, it's about evidence, it's about portioning claims to valid logic, so as not to be fooled by ourselves or others. It's in the Constitution of Oxford Skeptics in the Pub. I'm defining people who call themselves skeptics, who a more accurate description would be people who have an ideological commitment to certain things such as paranormal, conspiratorial matters, ufological, not being true.
Cynicism.
Whatever word we use, that's what I'm actually referring to. Yeah,
physicalism.
Yeah,
that's another good one. Yeah,
I think the best course of action is objectivism. That is to say, you don't necessarily believe something or disbelieve something. You're open to all options. But I think you're right, Ben. I think there's a mindset like if you don't want something to be true, you have confirmation bias towards everything proving that it's not true, kind of thing. So
that's it.
It's this kind of thing. I mean, if you take like a haunted show, like a Most Haunted type thing, you got some people, and I won't name them, some people who believe everything is spirit. Oh my God, something crashes and bangs, that's a spirit. You know, a feather floating, that's a spirit. I don't think that's helpful. I think because it can just be rational explanations. But what I also think is not helpful is people saying, oh, it's all a load of rubbish. No, this is just this is just that. Everything's provable, everything's explainable. You know, we live in a 3D world and that's it. I think a better approach is to be objective and to say, okay, I'm starting from a neutral position and I want to see what evidence there is and you know, go where the evidence is, basically. Now, Matt, this is really, really interesting.
Andy, do you mind if I just make a point? I'm sorry to be pedantic. If you use the term objectivism, some people might not understand, because objectivism is the name given to a philosophy of Ayn Rand, Ayn Rand was a radical American kind of Russian American libertarian who wrote a number of novels which were philosophically based. Yeah, which is a huge. That's a big.
What am I looking for in terms of words? Being objective, but without objectivism.
It's just, sorry to interrupt, but that's just if you use. But you could use the word objectivism for your own ideas as well. I mean, there's no copyright on that name. It's just that she called her own philosophy, which is actually nothing of the sort.
What would be a better term?
Like physicalism, actually, or material. I mean, I'd say atheomaterialism, skeptico-materialism. I mean, it's kind of like a linguistic debate, really, rather than, because we all understand what we're talking about, don't we?
Yeah.
The four of us here understand,
except me.
Before I forget my point, I'm gonna bring in something that's absolutely fascinating. So Matt, you mentioned John Fraser earlier on, didn't you? And if we're talking about the right guy, so he's the Scottish guy, glasses.
Scottish guy, glasses, did the Poltergeists, yeah.
Very, very intelligent guy, fantastic guy. How I know him is going on ghost walks in London. So there's a collective of people that go on ghost walks, and we used to go all over the place before COVID. COVID came along, kind of killed it. But I spoke to John Fraser a few times, and he's a fascinating guy. This is where it gets really interesting. Now, the Ancient Ram Inn in, I believe it's Gloucestershire, is reputedly one of the most haunted, paranormally active places probably on Earth, certainly in England. It's a very old place, reputedly extremely haunted. It's got stories of devil worship, and I'm going to have to close the window because it's binging at me. It's got devil worship, it's got kind of witchcraft, it's got lots of dark things going on. Very poltergeist activity kind of related things, even to the point where there were some doctors and nurses that did a sleepover, and apparently they were so scared by what went on they actually climbed out of the windows to actually get away from it. This is the story, because the doctors and nurses were complete skeptics. Oh yeah, it's just a load of old rubbish, you know. And I think it was like a charity sleepover type thing, but they couldn't wait to get the hell out of it. Now, this is where it gets interesting. John Fraser, I think I would describe him as a skeptic, but open-minded.
Yeah.
He said he had one of the best night's sleep in the room, the haunted bedroom of the ancient Ram Inn. What is going on there? Is his reality, has he brought in that I don't believe that this is real, and manifested a reality that nothing happens around him that's of a paranormal nature? What do you reckon? Because I don't know. I can't answer it. Why didn't you get anything
The nursing is open.
paranormal?
You're asking me to comment on something that I wasn't party to observing.
But the nurses were sceptical, weren't they? And it freaked them out.
Yes, this is it. Yeah.
So I have no idea. To be perfectly honest, this stuff doesn't jump when we shout jump.
Yeah.
You know, it's like when you've got Yvette Fielding going, "Mistletoe, babe." I'm just thinking, really? You know, if I was on the other side, I'd be going, "Get lost, I'm busy." That sort of stuff. We kind of treat the dead as a toy. That's why I don't personally like the term ghost hunting, because you know, you wouldn't hunt a human being alive. So
It's still on the run.
why would you hunt? Well, so you know what I mean. Why would you somebody who's passed over? My approach to all of this is it's a pastoral thing. It's to bring healing and wholeness and peace.
I've heard this actually from spirit guides saying the same thing. You know, you get ghost hunters that go to these places, take the temperatures of the room and listen for knocks or anything like that and atmospheres. But they say then the ghost researchers leave the place, but they don't give any consideration to where the soul is trapped there or having issues, you know.
Absolutely. I mean, so I'm going to pull this out again. Last chapter talks about when I went to a place called St. Breville's Castle. Don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's in the Forest of Dean. So I first came across St. Breville's Castle on Great British Ghosts.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So she went through a place called St. Breville's Castle, and I was watching it and saw this Youth Hostel Association sign on the door and thought, well, I'm a member of the Youth Hostel Association. Because it was a cheap holiday for me to take 3 lads and my wife to. So I looked it up. Brilliant. Excellent. They've got some, you know, they're still taking people in. This was just before lockdown. So between Christmas and New Year 2019, I took the family down to St. Breville's Castle. The lads didn't know what we were going to. Only my wife did. And we're climbing up the hill because it's, you know, we came in on the not through the right road. We came on the river road and we were climbing up this hill, get to the top, and it's completely misty and just backlit with this castle, and it's fantastic. But we spent 3 nights there over Christmas and loved it. No spookiness happened at all. Went back again in I think it was October 2022. 1922, yeah, that looked spooky. Went back in October 22 at the half term, and we were there from the Monday to the Thursday, so 3 nights. And nothing happened, and I was just listening in on what was going on. At the same time, on the Monday arrived a walking group with women, elderly men, and they had 2 dormitories, 2 of the big dormitories. So when I'm talking to the manager at the place, we packed up the things. Everything was in the boot of the car, except we were having breakfast, and I had a word with the manager and was having a chat. How do you have you got any spooky stories to tell? He said, well, no, not really. But we do go and knock on the door before we enter and say, you know, look, we're just coming in. However, she said, on Monday, there was a really dark presence. She said, I've never felt it before. There was an atmosphere in the prison and just on the landing outside. I'm like, oh, interesting. What had happened before then? And she said, well, we had a paranormal investigation team in for the weekend. I thought, so we had a conversation, much like I've just described, about the fact that I don't think that it's good to stir stuff up just because you want to capture something on evidence. Why are you disturbing the dead in that way? You know, treat them with respect. And she was really thankful that we had that approach. she said that my son then relayed that on the Monday night, the women's dormitory had all their windows blow open in the early hours. And I mean, we've been in that dormitory and they're lock handles like that. So you clink, and they're really stiff. So all of these things opened on the Monday night and something blew out, which was a bit weird. So I thought, well, okay, something's obviously been messed about with. And my family were just getting the last bits together. And I went up onto the landing and present. And I couldn't sense anything, but I just had a conversation and just with whatever was there, just to say, you know, look, if there's anything that's been disturbed, know you can find your peace in Christ, etc., etc. And just doing a pastoral thing with whatever might be there. Now, there wasn't anything that was, there wasn't anything like my head span round or doors went banging or anything like that. It was just nothing sensed. So I got to clean my teeth in my wash bag. My family were in the car. I went to the boot of the car. Now this is a 57 plate with a Bluetooth stereo that I bought from Aldi about 10 years previous. So my phone didn't automatically connect to the stereo. It wasn't one of those auto-connecting ones at the time. And as I got my hand up in the air to pull the boot lid down, there's this incredibly loud electronic noise coming from the speakers. I'm like, what on earth is that? My family, what's going on, Matt? What's going on? So got all of this electronic dirgy noise, and I'm thinking, okay, get into the car, it's playing along, and I'm going through my phone. It's an S7, Samsung S7, going through the phone, trying to find the app that was making any music, if it was playing. And I opened up VLC Player, because that's what I use for my music, and I closed all apps. It's still playing this music, and the music that came out had the words, "Peace will come to me, peace will come to me. I'm leaving bitterness behind. This time I'm cleaning out my mind. There is no space for the regrets I will remember to forget." Which is the opening words from Depeche Mode's track called Peace. Now, I've got 3,000 tracks on my phone, and just randomly it picked that one, which I didn't know what it was, which is why I was like, well, what is playing? I'd got the album. I'd downloaded a load of albums, but not got around to listening to them all at this point. So I've had a conversation with something that has been disturbed, I believe, by investigators previously. I've, attempted to broker peace, bring peace to the area. Don't get any response. The very, very last thing that my feet are just about to leave the ground before I jet off with the family. And it was only when we got to Monmouth that I found the album, what it was, because we drove off and we stopped off at Monmouth. It was only then I found it was Depeche Mode's Peace track. And I'm like, okay. So that, to me, suggests confirmation that what was there had found peace. Or it could just be, as Chris French says, a massive coincidence.
We'll never know. This is the weird thing. We'll never.
Yeah, exactly. So there you go. I mean, I that's how I operate anyway.
That reminds me of the story that you've told, Ben, of the Michael Shermer thing. Where, he's on his wedding day. Do you want to recount that further?
Yeah, Michael Shermer talked about.
He's a skeptic.
Yeah, he's a skeptic. According to his own words, this made him rock back on his heels and shook his skepticism to his core. It's quite a long story. I'll cut it short. He got married to a lady in his home, because you could do that where he lives in California, USA. And during this wedding, he heard music playing from a little portable radio that belonged to his wife. Now, this was very important. It had a lot of sentimental value. This was a 1970s Philips transistor radio. It hadn't worked in years. He didn't even know there was any batteries in it. But there were batteries in it, but he had put batteries in. But he'd been trying to get it fix it and it wouldn't work. And she said, don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't work. I mean, it probably wouldn't pick up digital stations anyway. But then music starts playing from it, and it's a song her granddad liked. And Sherman went, wow. I remember these words. I don't remember all the details, but I remember the words. He said, if I'd heard this story from someone else, I wouldn't have believed it. And I said, well, he has heard this story from other people, and he hasn't believed it. Now it's happened to him. I was interested to see where he'd go from there, because I watched his debates with Graham Hancock that started very, very vitriolic. Then after doing a number of sort of Joe Rogan spots, they kind of became friends. And Graham was trying to persuade him to go to the jungle and take ayahuasca. I'm fascinated to find out what will happen there.
That'd be a great episode.
Yeah.
So just changing the tone slightly, this comes from a debate I had online with someone over YouTube, and it was basically there's no such thing as life after death, no such thing as mediums, or they're all charlatans, blah, 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 blah. No such thing as ghosts. And I basically had a quick debate with someone, and he said my reasoning, he said a proper Bayesian reasoning mandate gives proper weights and values to a claim and adjusts accordingly when evidence arises to revive conclusions. You ever heard of Bayesian, Ben? Is that something you might know of?
Yes, I have. There was what happened was a guy called Daryl Bem did a psychic prediction study, or it was I think it was precognitive dreams. I can't remember, I can't remember the details, but he published a paper which said that it was beyond chance that certain people were getting certain dreams at certain time or certain experiences. And there was a reply. A skeptic responded by saying that he hadn't used Bayesian inference, which is a form of statistical analysis of data. And I don't remember any more details than that, except I did read both papers years ago, and I know that the skeptics didn't buy Bem's conclusions in the end.
Yeah, it's only because this skeptic that I was debating with online, and I always pick skeptics because it's good fun to have a punch up with. So he was basically saying there's no such thing as ghosts, and he said that these people were deluded. And I said, well, what happens when you got he was using an example of people with schizophrenia. He says homeless people, they've had schizophrenia and they hear voices and blah 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 blah. I said, yeah, but what happens when you got two people that have claimed to seeing a ghost at the same time? They both terrified. And he was saying, but you got to use this Bayesian sort of analysis or something. And I was thinking, I've never heard of this term, but I looked into it, and you got to give weight and consideration to the proper analysis of it all and things like that. But I thought, well, even if these people are still not taking that data on board, the fact that there's quite a few people that have seen the same ghost exactly the same time. It's been verified. They're not hearing voices. They're not schizophrenic. They're normal people. I mean, I met a policeman who was with his wife walking at some stately home, and they saw this ghost walking towards them. In fact, it followed them twice, this ghost, apparently. So they claimed. And, it's just an interesting thing that, you can't dismiss ghosts just as some schizophrenic bloody hallucination, can you?
Well, the problem is if you say something's a coincidence, you're essentially positing an unfalsifiable hypothesis, because you're saying, well, this is something that is physically possible, and no matter how unlikely it is, I'm going to accept this rather than a paranormal phenomenon. Through some principle I'm not going to detail, but just I say you have to accept every physical possible explanation before you accept a paranormal solution. I don't know why, but they'll just say, well, that's a principle, that's a standard we're going to set. In which case, then debunking just becomes an exercise of the imagination. You could just say, well, maybe it was a clown with a day off from the circus. Hence my term, the clown's day off fallacy, because there's no response to that. Because you can't say, well, what clown? They'll say, I don't know, but which is more, but it doesn't involve lake monsters or UFOs or ghosts. Therefore, I've come up with this, I pulled this out of my bottom, this entire theoretical model, and you have to accept it as real because it's physically possible and doesn't involve ghosts. So there.
Well,
there's no answer to that.
And Andrew mentioned about white feathers and things like that previously. I used to be a massive skeptic on white feather. I really did. I'd smile and nod and do the pastoral thing, and that's lovely. When my mum died in April 2023, I didn't know, because it was on the late bank holiday, so it was on the 30th of April. I didn't know about it until the 1st of May. And that was the bank holiday, Monday. And I went back straight away to school the next day, because what do? Your brother's a policeman. He sorted out all of the various bits and pieces. So having gone down to the house on the Monday, I, just said what I needed to do, what I felt what I needed to do, and then went back home. Going out to the car on the Monday, on the Tuesday morning, smack bang in the dead centre, if you did a corner to corner of the main panel, not the window, but the main panel of the driver's door, was a white feather stuck to it. Now I thought, it's April, it's May, fledgling birds, all that sort of stuff. Fair enough. But I'll keep it just in case. I'll put it on the dashboard. I took it as an opportunity to say, give thanks for Mum. Then my wife was later telling this story to my eldest son, and they noticed a white feather was attached on the cobweb between her passenger window and the top of the front windscreen pillar on that side. There was a white feather on it. And she said, well, okay, if there's something in this, then tomorrow something major will happen with the house sale. This was selling a house. And the very next day, something major happened with the house sale that was really positive. And we thought, okay, Now I'm then relaying both these stories to my brother over the phone, who's down in Dudley in the West Midlands. He's a copper, as I said before, and so he's got a sceptical head on it. And as I just told him that last bit about my wife and my son, he goes, huh? And I went, what? And he said, I've just opened my laptop and there on the keyboard, and you can fill in the rest.
Yeah.
There's a white feather. And I was thinking, okay, so that's a confirmation of 3. Now, how did that feather get in there? Well, it could have just floated in there, as feathers do. But all these 3 things, am I just reading meaning into it? I could be. But also, I'm actually open-minded to the fact that maybe there is more things in heaven and earth than our philosophies are ratio, as Shakespeare penned in Hamlet.
I think this is the problem, how and why things to do with the paranormal and spiritual nature can never be fully proven, because although, it does look like spirits have placed it or loved ones have placed it in very unusual positions, the fallout position, the fallback position of like a skeptic could just be, will it just coincidentally happen to land here, and land here? So we can't prove it. And this is the annoying thing. But maybe this adds the mystery to it. Maybe we need this to be like this, so there is some degree of mystery still in it.
I love a mystery.
I'll just say this before I go, because we've got to wrap up now. But when my mum passed away, she passed away very suddenly, and I was there at the house when it happened. And about 10 months later, we happened to find ourselves, my wife and I, in a kind of bums on seats villa people for a kind of an Ouija board session with some people in the local area who ran this Ouija board thing. Heard good stories about the whole thing. I know people go, "Oh, Ouija board, scary," but it was actually very interesting. And I remember the vicar at her funeral saying, because my mum wasn't religious at all, although she was brought up as a kind of Church of Scotland thing. That was just a label that's tagged around her from where her background was, but she wasn't at all. She was more interested in the spiritualism, unofficially sort of thing. So I was kind of annoyed when the vicar said, I'm sure that when Margaret passed on, the first thing she did when she opened her eyes, she saw Jesus waiting for her. And I was just really silently peed off, when I heard that. I thought, oh, that really grates me. And so I was kind of chuffed to hear when she came through the Ouija board 10 months later. I wasn't expecting her to come through, but she came through and said, hi, son, and tested the thing. She gave out her name, gave out her address, gave my date of birth, and all these things that were totally just unique to her. She knew. So I started to then ask scientific questions, and I said, so what happened when you died? What did you do? Go through a tunnel of light or something like that? And she said, no, sorry, I asked, have you met your mum and dad on the other side? I said, Granny and Grandad Bob was what I called them, Granny and Grandad Bob. And she said, yes, I have. She goes, my mum came and met me. And I thought that was really interesting. So in another follow-up session about a year after that, I said, could you tell me more about the fact when you said your mum came and met you? And she said, yes, when I went out of my body, she says, my mum was already waiting in the corner of the room to collect her, which I thought was really interesting. She made no mention of Jesus or God or anything like that. She just went on to the other side, whatever that may be. Not saying there isn't a Jesus, there isn't a God. I'm just saying that she never met him, she never spoke about him. But I just had a bit of a problem with the vicar, I think, and that's my axe to grind. Vicar, and he knows, but I'm thinking, no, you don't, because you haven't explored the side of things like you have, Matt. You've taken this bull by the horns that a lot of Christians and a lot of religious people that have hammered people like me and Andy for exploring. You've taken it by, and you've kind of tried to set the record straight, I think, which is really, really admirable.
Yeah. I mean, that thing with your mum would be Colin Wilson's done a book on deathbed visitations or deathbed visions. I can't remember what it is. But that is a very common thing. Even Steve Jobs, his last words were, wow, oh, wow, oh, wow.
Yeah. That's interesting.
And the hospice workers say that people who are passing through see these things. So, you know, I'm expecting to be welcomed by my mum, although I dreamt I had a visitation in a dream a few weeks ago from her. And then following that, the next week, it was basically, I've moved to a new house. So she's moved on in the afterlife in some way.
Yeah.
Left me an address, but I can't remember what it was.
Right. Do you want to give us the name of your book once more, Matt?
Okay. The book is The Invisible Dimension, Spirit Beings, Ghosts and the Afterlife by Matthew D. Arnold. And available on all good publishing sites, including the Big A.
Okay. And you also got your website,
Ghosts, Ghouls and God.co.uk, and I also edit the Christian Parapsychologist Journal as well.
Brilliant.
Which is publication of the Church's Fellowship.
Now, I know by the time this goes out, you would have done this, but you're due to go to the Ghost Club.
This Saturday coming, which will be November the 16th, I'll be doing the Epworth Poltergeist talk at the Ghost Club, with the extra bits, because I prepared an hour's talk for the ASAP and found out on the Friday morning it was only half an hour, so there was
I was kind of disappointed each talk was only half an hour. I was a bit gutted about that.
The last ones were half an hour.
Yeah. But anyway, well done to do that talk, and well done for the ASAP conference, which me and Ben thoroughly enjoyed. I'll definitely try and get there next year. Any final words? That's my surname, Dole. Any final words, Andy or Ben?
Well, I'll go first. Yeah, I've really enjoyed this. It's been great fun. It's been good to talk to Matt, and good to see Neil and Andy again. And we're all in the process of plugging books. Don't forget Roswell Rising, a novel of disclosure. £10, all outlets now. That's my book, and there's sequels. There's 2 sequels to that, so please do check that out. And Hospital Orders Against the New World Order. Find me.
I think my book would be called Screw Keir Starmer. Fascinating talk today. Really enjoyed this, and it's interesting hearing things from a Christian perspective as well. That's not completely disparaging. So that's quite because the thing is, I mean, as humans, no matter what philosophy or what religion you're part of, we're all after the same thing, which is the truth, whatever that truth may be. It's just different variations or different takes on it. We all want to know, is there something out there? What is that thing? It's just how we get there. So, yeah.
Excellent. All right, but thank you very much indeed once again to Matt Arnold for joining us on the Paranormal Peep Show. So this is Neil, Andy and Ben and Matt saying good night from the Paranormal Peep Show on the Paranormal UK Radio Network, and we'll catch you next month. Good night.
Take care.
See ya.
Peep.